Would Jane Kingston please come forward? Jane Kingston. Bill Kingston was born December 6, 1926 to blue-collar parents. Both sides of his family, the Fenwicks and the Kingstons, were originally from New Brunswick. His parents split when Bill was still young, his father dying an alcoholic in 1951. Bill and his sister Verna worked through their youth to help their mother support the family. Part of Bill's childhood was spent on a relative's farm on the prairies. He spent some time living in the Saskatoon YMCA, and another stretch of his youth living in a Saskatoon boat club. The Kingston family were chronic Detroit Red Wing fans after Bill played outdoor hockey with Gordie Howe on a team that saw Gordie's mom. Degree. By the time Bill's daughter Jane was born, this is Jane on stage, he was working full-time for the YMCA, instructing swimming, gymnastics, and trampoline. He's remembered for the time he took off his shoes to demonstrate on the trampoline, only to discover that his wife had darned his white socks with red thread. The family bought one of Nova Scotia's first television sets in 1954 so that Bill could watch sports, especially football and hockey. In 1955, he used his science and love of driving to work as traveling salesman for pharmaceuticals. Traveling all over the Atlantic provinces, he saw how rural medicine was practiced and decided that that was what he wanted to do. In 1957, he made a deal which allowed that the Newfoundland government would pay for his medical education if, upon graduation, he practiced medicine in a town of their choice for 1 year and a Newfoundland town of his own choice for another 2. He sold all his fishing gear, aquarium, various other hobby paraphernalia, to start med school at Dal, supporting his family by continuing to work summers for SEBA in Ontario. Upon graduation, he took up the promised Newfoundland practiced in Musgrave Town, where he became very popular with the locals because when times got tough, he'd accept lobster or fish as payment for service. He'd freeze this stuff, then hold a big party and feed all the people that gave it to him in the first place. It was the only way he could empty his freezer to begin the next season. Bill Kingston loved to think of himself as one of the boys. He had oft-stated disdain for the type of physicians who thought of themselves as God. Because they were doctors, and he was in awe of true craftsmen. Bill loved a really successful fisherman, or a skilled carpenter, or a fast ditch digger. One reason their skills impressed him was his own manual clumsiness. He once reported to Richard Sloan-White that his brand new Black & Decker skill saw wouldn't cut, kept smoking. Richard discovered that Bill had put the blade on backwards. Sloan-White was a Bill Kingston educated athletic trainer for whom he had great respect and in whom he placed great confidence. He once left Sloan-White outside the room while he met with a few physicians interested in starting a sport medicine society. He told Richard to wait because many doctors had trouble dealing with non-medical professionals. Bill told Richard he'd go in and tread lightly, break the ice. Primarily, said he, because they're not going to want you drinking their rye and spitting on their floor. In 1966, the Kingstons were intending to stay in Newfoundland, where he developed a very efficient rural clinic, complete with x-ray and dispensary. And Dal offered him the chance to set up the first Dalhousie Student Health facilities, with the opportunity to work with the athletic teams as one of the major functions. Starting with a few rooms in the dorm, Dr. Kingston put together a very impressive clinic, treating students, their families, and of course the athletes. Here he was able to dabble in all his favorite fields, obstetrics, gynecology, physiology, and athletic medicine. But Bill Kingston didn't just dispense prescription. In addition to his normal load, hundreds of messed up Dal kids in the late 60s and early 70s credit him with getting them started toward fruitful lives. Dr. David Petrie, with whom he worked for many years, speaks as well about his doing the same thing for some of the Nova Scotian voyageurs. Dr. Kingston attended all the Dal games, many of the voyageur games, and spent many sleepless nights delivering babies, but he always had time for people. He and Sloan White began attending many symposium clinics in the States to learn about the burgeoning field of sports medicine. During his Dalhousie period of his career, he got involved as well with professional wrestlers, the All-In soccer team, the Voyageurs, the high school athletes, and just about anyone else who had an athletically related injury. In 1968, after a grueling 2-week drive to Nashville and back, Bill Kingston suffered a heart attack. Realizing that he was shortening his life by maintaining the hectic schedule he'd undertaken while at Dal, he decided to go back into rural medicine. He set up a practice in Lordways, Cape Breton, a small town near St. Peter's. The theory made sense, but Bill Kingston was Bill Kingston. He just continued to do everything to excess as he had throughout his whole life. Because of his father's alcoholism, Bill refused to drink, but he overdid everything else. He didn't practice what he preached. With profound medical authority, he'd tell people to stop smoking and eat less, while he was a gorger and ordered his imported non-filter Philip Morris cigarettes by the case of cartons. Before embarking on one of his many road trips, he'd buy a stash of meat pies and Joe Louis bars. His closest friends and associates say that the only time he became a bit irrational was when someone interfered with his eating. He once walked through a hotel dining room in Nashville and spotted a pecan pie. He immediately called down, told me when to buy it. When they said they'd only sell him a piece or two, he got furious. In less than 7 years, with the help of the Lordways Catholic Parish, he formed one of the most advanced rural clinics in Canada, which today proudly bears his name. Dr. Petrie tells of Bill Kingston riding in the ambulance all the way to Halifax, keeping one of his patients alive at great expense to his own health. But no story exemplifies everything Dr. Bill Kingston stood for, like the one told by a couple from River Bourgeois. It seems the woman got sick one night, called Bill at 2 a.m. When he showed up to treat her, it was obvious to both the man and the woman that he was far sicker than she. In the province and had a major influence on many physicians, including present-day practicing sport medicine specialists, Drs. Stanish, Petrie, and Stocker. The flourishing Sport Medicine Council of Nova Scotia nominated Dr. Kingston, strongly urging that he be the first physician inducted into the Hall of Fame as a builder of sport. It's our pleasure to do just that tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the father of Nova Scotian sport medicine, Dr. Bill Kingston.
I'd ask Dr. Bill Standish to please come forward to make the presentation. Jane, I want to ask Dr. Standish if he will stay with us because I know he has some interesting things to remember about your dad. What do you remember best about him?
Well, he was my father. That's a tall order, okay? His care of people, whether they be his friends, his patients, his colleagues.
I remember him very well as the first physician for the Nova Scotia Voyageurs in the American Hockey League in the early seasons of 1970 to 72. And I remember him as a quiet man. Very effective in his work, but quiet. Sort of low-key.
Quiet and low-key to those who didn't know him well, maybe, but certainly not to those who were close to him.
Dr. Standish, he had to provide some kind of inspiration for what followed for you, because you went on, of course, to become one of the great sports medicine authorities in the world.
He was a great inspiration to many of us, and particularly as athletes, because as Jane will attest, he was very giving, always extremely generous with his time, his energy, and sometimes his money. But in fact, there's no greater godfather of sport medicine in Canada than Bill Kingston.
he would be pleased with the advancements, I'm sure, that continue to be made in that very important area.
Very, very much so. But it was interesting that Bill Kingston was truly a classic physician and emphasized physical skills rather than technology.
Treating the whole patient and not just part of the patient, which is something that's being forgotten today in medicine as far as I can see.
Well, he will be forever remembered by a lot of people, not only in the metro area throughout the country, but certainly in his final residency in Lordways, where his memory is being perpetuated with that marvelous clinic.
Yes, we are joined today by several people who have come all the way from Cape Breton, and I really appreciate their presence here tonight.
Let's allow them to stand. Those people who have made the trip. There they are. It's nice to have them with you, Jane, to share in this great moment. Thank you very much. Thank you. Jane Kingston.